We are live. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes.
Good evening. We're going to call the planning board meeting for January 20th.
No, you're going to start Board of Adjustment.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to call the, the Board of Adjustments meeting to order.
Okay? So you need to adopt the agenda.
I'm sorry, let me just switch over to that for the other meeting to come up. Well, we're going to looking to adopt the,
The agenda, we don't have any changes.
I'm sorry, I was just wanted that to come up on here. But we do have a motion to adopt the, thank you, Mike.
I need to vote.
Aye. All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Kelly is here. There we go. He's fine, just don't worry about it. Okay, so
We're just getting ready to close the Board of Adjustment, so you're on time.
So you can go into the adoption of the previous minutes. You have just December saying, actually, it might be November and December, saying that those meetings were canceled. So just a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the Board of Adjustments meeting as presented?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. There are no cases scheduled to be heard. And then I think we have a call to consider the adoption of the revised 2026 Board of Adjustments meeting schedule. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at that?
Only thing is, we're just canceling the Board of Adjustments February meeting. Y'all don't need it. You're already having a joint meeting with council that night, and somehow I don't think y'all want 3 meetings in the same night. So,
Sounds good. Okay, then
motion to adopt.
let's go ahead and present a motion to adopt the 2026 Board of Adjustment meeting schedule as presented.
So moved.
All in favor? Okey dokey. Then I'm going to go ahead and call for an adjournment of the Board of Adjustments meeting for January 20th, 2026. All in favor? Aye, which I don't think we need.
Thank you guys, sorry, I have like staff work who just got surgery, so I was waiting to hear. Just a gallbladder, no big deal.
You're right on
Everybody needs a
time.
gallbladder.
All right, so you are good to move into planning board now,
She's a hot mess.
and you can take a minute if you need to.
Okay,
Let's see.
so we're going to call to order the planning board now.
Yeah, let me make sure I am in planning board. Okay. I wasn't sure if I was still the other one. All right, so I am calling the planning board meeting of January 20th, 2026 to order. We have a quorum, and we are not missing any members.
Everyone is here.
Yep, all right, perfect. We do not have remote participation, correct?
No one is remote, just an
All right.
applicant.
And so if I could get a motion to adopt the agenda,
So moved?
all in favor?
Aye.
And adoption of the previous minutes, has everyone had a chance to look over that and, oh, sorry, it's updating like, it's kind of, it's like visually like distracting me.
Way to go, Logan, you're off and running.
So has everyone had a chance to read the previous minutes? And if so, are there any questions, comments, changes? And if not, if I could get a motion to approve?
We are approving both, because one was canceled, so,
Oh, we're approving both.
okay, so I
Oh,
make a
for
motion.
11, okay, so to adopt the minutes from 11/18/25, which are our regular session, and 12/16/25, which was canceled.
Okay, I make a motion to go ahead and approve both the regular and the December 16th canceled meeting.
And all in favor?
Aye.
It's like having AI.
So
You're very
fast.
fast. I haven't even met you yet, but you're very fast.
I'm also following behind him too, so you literally have 2 people that can help.
Whatever it is, keep it up.
It's like, all right, since we don't have anyone here in the audience, I'm assuming there is no public comment tonight?
No
All
public,
right,
no
so
comment.
moving on, so we're moving on to new business, discussion and recommendation for ZTA, wait, it just moved, 2026-1, Dunkin' Donuts signage.
All right, good evening, Planning Board. So the village has received a zoning text amendment application, basically to amend the signage regulations in the Marvin Gardens ICD development standards. If you guys recall, you guys reviewed probably the Duncan signage last year, maybe 2024. But one of the things that they had originally proposed was having the sign over their front door, or the entrance of the building, the sign over the drive-through window, and then a rear sign that was kind of facing the intersection of Newtown and Providence. The ordinance only allows for 2 wall-mounted signs, so essentially, I'm going to try to keep this short. Like, the short end of what this amendment's proposing is to allow that additional wall-mounted sign, but it only then will apply to structures that have dual right-of-way frontage, which this building's kind of at an angle, so therefore it has frontage towards Newtown as well as Providence. So really, this is the only building / the only tenant that this would kind of apply to. But essentially, it's allowing them to get that additional sign for visibility at that intersection. And in their packets is the text amendment application as well as the sign. The sign design, it matches the exact one that's already there. The applicant is online if you wanna mention anything else. Like I said, just keeping it kind of high level on the request.
No, I think this is smart. You know, if we have businesses going in our commercial spaces, we want them to succeed, and marketing is key to that. So I think it's a good move. Anyone else have comments?
I concur. Ditto.
All right, so then if we could get a motion to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment application number. Oh, go ahead.
Will this affect any other properties in Marvin?
No, because since Marvin Gardens is its own individual conditional zoning district, it has its own set of zoning regulations that only apply to that development and nowhere else. So it'd only be amending their development standards for that zoning district. On top of, then when you really look at development as a whole, it really only would apply to this out parcel because it's at the intersection. It's, like I said, it's a very simple change, and it's not gonna allow for additional signage, for example, like, I'm trying to think of it. Like, for example, if somebody wanted to put a back sign on like where the emergency or the urgent care is, like they have one on the side and the front, but it wouldn't, allow them to put it on the back because that's not adjacent to a public right of way. So it's really kind of the way that this was drafted, and I discussed this with the applicant, and this was my recommendation to them. Like, it's a pretty simple change to only allow where it's not changing anything else for the total development. Like I said, overall, it only applies to Marvin Gardens as a whole.
So what about other out parcels that are vacant? Could it affect them?
The only other one would actually probably be the out parcel on the adjacent across that access or that entrance road at Marvin Gardens where the Whataburger was being proposed, because they then technically would have right-of-way frontage on Providence and that side road and potentially the Marvin Gardens Drive road. So potentially, but it's kind of the same concept there.
All right.
What about and I can't remember, the business at the other end of this building where Duncan is?
So I know there's a Yoga 6 there in the middle. I can't remember if there's...
They've got 2 signs. They've got one, on the back and one on the front. Yeah.
Correct. And like I said, the way that building's situated in relation to that intersection, that's part of the issue, is that, I took Lucas around the day and was showing him, like, you have that Yoga 6 one on the back, and when Duncan was originally going through their signage approval, that was kind of what was discussed. Did they want to put it on the back or over the drive-through? And in a way, you have that visibility on Providence, but if somebody's at that intersection of Newtown and Providence or coming on Providence towards Waxhaw, you don't see that visibility, and that's, like I said, that's really all this is trying to achieve. So I would have to go back and look. I can't remember if Yoga 6 has technically, because I know there was 3 leasable spaces in that building. I can't remember if there is a third tenant or if Yoga 6 has both.
I went by there. I think it's, technically, I guess it has frontage on Newtown.
Yep.
But
it would be similar, but like I said, right now, it would be the same concept. But the 7-Eleven then kind of blocks that visibility. So I think, like I said, it's the way that the building sits, essentially.
Planning board, if I may chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to be remote. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, but the travel at this time of day is quite challenging to Marvin. So thank you all for allowing the Zoom meeting. There is signage for the third tenant, which is Magnolia Med Spa. And Yoga 6 also has signage at the elevation where we're proposing a third sign. My stance with our customer, with Duncan, was that this will improve traffic flow. There's no way that customers would see signage if they're traveling westbound on Newtown Road. So the other tenants do have signage on this elevation, but we do not.
It looks like there's also, there are two more out parcels, not just one.
Correct.
It makes, to me, it makes sense, so.
And I think, like, for example, like the Whataburger, when it was being proposed, like, once again, like, not happening at this time, but their signage was on both sides of the building, so it's like you could see it on either side of Providence, and essentially, this text amendment could allow for them to put up another sign on, like, facing Providence, but in my, like I said, opinion on this is, like, you still have regulations on the size. This is matching their other signage. It's not any larger, any different of the design. And it, as the applicant stated, it literally comes down to the visibility at that intersection, and that's really what that is trying to achieve. And so, like I said, staff does recommend the approval. It's pretty straightforward on this request.
Sorry, one last quick question. I'm looking at the aerial map, not at the text amendment. So, would this, if the two additional out parcels that haven't been built out yet, are they, if someone wanted signage, so if it were, for example, the Whataburger had, a sign on both sides, but they didn't necessarily need one on the back, but they choose to put one in the front instead, that would be okay? Because I know we were struggling with, like, how do you even know what it is? When
Yeah,
you're
and like I
internally in the parking lot.
Like I said, I think, we've said this would only then apply to this parcel as well as, like I said, there's potential 2 other out parcels, but what it's doing is it's basically trying to make sure that, to your point, creating that visibility, and the size requirements and stuff, you're not overloading the building with signage. We already kind of have that covered. It's just mainly making sure that, yeah, you can see it, because that marketing and visibility is important for then getting business and people in and out, knowing where it's at, so.
And it actually reduces the amount of wayfinding signs you need, which
Yeah.
can clutter as well, so. All right, any other questions, comments before we make a motion? All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I go ahead and recommend approval of zoning text amendment application 2026-1 for the amendment to the Marvin Gardens development standard regarding wall signage, and find that the proposed text amendments are consistent with the Village of Marvin 2020 land use plan and other officially adopted village plans, and is reasonable and in the public interest.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved.
All right, so, and yeah, just for clarification, so yeah, this will go to the council. Their meeting will be on February 2nd, correct?
Yes.
And that's where the public hearing will be, and they'll have the final conversation. But I'll email you, just to prepare prior to the meeting.
Thank you all. Thanks for allowing us to be remote again. We appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Being here.
All right, moving on to our planner's report.
Oh, unfinished business.
Just kidding.
I put it out of order. I usually let the applicants go first before we have our long discussions.
Okay, sorry. Unfinished business, so discussion of amendments to Article 11.
All right, so I'll be honest.
Around on my screen, I'm like, not following.
I have, one, if you haven't had a chance, this is Lucas. Lucas is our new planning tech, and he replaced Polemy. He's been with us now, this is a week, so.
You can't technically replace Polemy, but you are your own new thing. Welcome.
And he came back. He came back.
Yeah. So especially after the retreat last week and seeing everything going on, he was committed to us. So glad that he's here. And what I'm getting to. So in short, we've been looking at, if you recall, you guys recommended a text amendment back in November to basically repeal and replace Chapter 93, making Chapter 93 our public tree ordinance. That was for Tree City USA. I will mention, we were awarded that. So we are now a Tree City USA community, and thank you guys for all your help in that. But if you recall, I mentioned that there were some development regulations in old Chapter 93 that we want to then now incorporate into our Article 11. I'm still working through that. I've got a list of those development regulations, and my goal tonight was kind of, I wanted a high-level conceptual kind of get some direction on that. However, with the amount of stuff going on, I don't have all that ready to kind of discuss, but in short, those goals of moving that stuff, I think, is one, to make clear regulations, and I'm going to say all this and just make sure you guys are kind of in agreement with the direction I'm headed with this, but one is there was clear kind of a mitigation calculation and every stuff in Chapter 93, so getting that kind of a clear, like, hey, if you're getting a, development approval, you're removing X amount of trees, you have to mitigate it with X amount of trees. It's kind of already outlined like that in our ordinance, but, a clear chart, I think, goes a long way. As well as looking at some of the, buffering and other tree preservation standards. In our old ordinance, we had a 25-foot tree preservation, like a perimeter tree, 25-foot perimeter buffer for all developments. Now in Article 11, you have those different buffer types, buffer type A, B, C, and D. And, is one thing, like, in between subdivision developments, do we want to require that 25-foot tree preservation strip buffer, or I want to say it can be anywhere from a 10 to a 20-foot buffer, depending on the adjacent zoning in the current Article 11. Any kind of feedback on that?
Sorry, let me just recap what you're saying. So we already have A, B, C.
CD, yep.
Right, ABC. So you're asking, sorry, what exactly are you asking?
Yeah, sorry, like I said, I wanted to have a little bit more of an outline for you guys tonight, and that's my apologies. But in the old Chapter 93, for any type of subdivision development, it required a interior and exterior tree preservation perimeter. So that exterior one was typically a 25-foot tree perimeter buffer where those trees had to remain undisturbed, and then you had an interior that either was preserved during development, or that's like where they would plant their mitigation trees that wouldn't go back on individual lots. Now in the new ordinance, or in new article, or in Article 11, you have buffer type A, B, C, and D, which is a 10, 20, 30, 40-foot buffer, and that is dependent upon the proposed development and the adjacent zoning. So for example, and let me just actually pull this up to make sure I'm saying the right thing when I say this. So if a property was on SFR1 and doing a subdivision, and they abutted, for example, a rural residential, they would have to have, I think it's only a 10 or 20 foot, let's see, Development District SFR type C. Yeah, it would be a 20-foot buffer. So it's like, do we want to clarify that to an extent on like residential subdivisions, or do we just want the current buffer language to kind of prevail? Like, the ultimate goal I'm trying to get to is, strengthening our tree ordinance to preserving trees during development, as well as looking at those buffer standards and seeing if we need to enhance or increase or revise those depending on certain districts. Once again, 99% of Marvin is zoned either rural residential SFR 1, 2, or 3. And they would have to go through the rezoning process to pretty much further develop, because they're most likely a large tract's going to be zoned rural residential. But just trying to, like I said, we've had some conversation with the new council members, and I've had some preliminary conversations with Keith, but I know we kind of talked through a lot of different stuff at the November meeting, and so I'm just trying to get some feedback on what you guys want out of this Article 11 as it pertains to development. And that, like I said, development can mean your neighbor doing a accessory structure to literally a full-on subdivision. And so there are tree preservation standards and requirements in the ordinance that in my opinion, that's can be kind of clarified, and that's one thing that we'll go through probably at the next meeting. But there's other things that, like I said, was in the old Chapter 93 that's not necessarily in Article 11, and I'm trying to figure out if that's the same direction we want to go. And I know I don't have it in front of you, I'm just trying to get some initial kind of, I guess, like overall, what are the board's goals or kind of thoughts on what they would like to see when it comes to tree removal, tree mitigation, tree preservation, buffers in regards to that development?
I would say, after my fun experience this past year, in so many regards around our neighborhood, after preserving canopy trees, which I feel like this being a tree, all the standards will apply, help with that. After preserving those, it's really more about buffering. And I have actually seen, a 50-foot no-cut buffer, but when you take out all the brush, it doesn't look like anything. It's inconsequential almost, so besides the fact that you're preserving those canopy trees on the edge. So now we're dealing with light pollution and some other things. So it feels like having combinations that we could pull from, what you were suggesting, A, B, and C. I mean, I would actually prefer now, going back in time, to having that no-cut buffer, but a no-cut tree, I don't know, what is it, 25 to 50 feet, depending on the...
You're talking about for the Heritage District? Or the no-cut only really applies to the Heritage District. That no-cut language was from the old form-based code.
Okay.
But to your point,
Well,
that's
again,
kind of...
We'll have another one soon, so...
It's, to your point, though, that's something like, and looking at how you regulate trees, it's going to come down to, like, in a way, the property itself, right? In Marvin, you've had a difference of farmland be developed that didn't have any trees, and then you've also had fully wooded lots that have been developed. And so, each development's going to be different, and that's why you typically see the exterior being preserved, just because when you think about grading, stormwater, all that stuff, like, you're getting into where they don't have to touch those, but, do we want to then also try to have them preserve some on the interior? And it is gonna be kind of a development by development type basis. I'm just trying to see, like, do we want to look at percentage? Like, for example, like Weddington, I think their ordinance says something regarding, like, and it's kind of complex, but it makes sense. It talks about the size of the property pre-development, how much tree canopy coverage that property has, and then there's a ratio of then how much has to be preserved. So then it does change in a way from development to development. And I mean, I do think that's a roundabout way that we could do it. I don't know if we mirror it exactly, but, like our ordinance basically for a tree credit area basically says, if anything over 10 acres has to preserve at least 6% of the total lot area, and it says 4 inches or greater in DBH that are located within the required planting yard or within 25 feet of the side and rear property lines, whichever is greater. So that's, in a way, your 25-foot tree preservation strip. It's just, it doesn't necessarily line up with the buffer, if that makes sense, because it's a 20-foot buffer. So, it's stuff like that of, like, what direction do we want to go towards when it comes to tree preservation? Like, I believe everybody's on.
So are you saying, like, what are the options? So there's percentage of total...
Yep.
Well, or total...
We can keep it simple, and it can be just a percentage of the lot, of, like, the development tract, kind of how it already reads. It can be, like I said, we can go into greater detail and breaking it into the pre-development conditions of the lot. How many trees are, is it a fully wooded site? Is it partially wooded? Is it a farm tract? Like, because all those are gonna then vary into how they preserve trees. It's, with your larger lot type developments, that's where you can get into, like, a more individual lot by lot basis in preserving trees. An example like the preserve, when it was developed, they did an individual lot tree removal permit and stuff for majority of it. There was still a lot of trees removed that were kind of within the infrastructure per se. But that individual lot look, it gives you a chance to preserve certain trees on certain lots.
And it
These,
didn't look like it was, it looked like a much more mature neighborhood, a lot faster than, say, the newest development, you know what I mean? So-
correct, and that's, like I said, smaller lots, it's harder to preserve, no doubt. And but they all said there is that they preserved more, and they preserved more than they would have had if they didn't have to do that. So there is kind of, like I said, some give and take and different standards there. I'm just trying to figure out, and, you know, we looked at, Lucas, and if you want to, like I said, add anything that I'm kind of missing, like in your research, you know, we looked at a couple different ordinances, and in short, we're kind of in line with, we looked at Weddington, Wesley Chapel, Harrisburg, what were the other two? I have it right here, sorry. Pineville and, that might have been the four. But the short end of it is, like, in a roundabout way, we all kind of say the same thing. The goal is to preserve what we can, but at the same time, if you can't preserve, you can plant back. But, you know, with discussion with some of the new council members, as well as even kind of our discussion, is like, do we want to focus on preserving instead of enhancing type thing? Like, I mean,
Instead of what?
like mitigation. Overall, our ordinance basically states that, yes, please preserve. If you can't preserve, you have to mitigate, where then it enhances over time. But to your point, it's kind of sometimes a shock or difference of how people see it, because you have certain neighborhoods that, you know, maybe did preserve a little bit more on interior lots, where then it does kind of give that more mature feel. And then you have neighborhoods that, yeah, that preserved a good amount on the exterior, but everything in the interior is mitigation planting. So they're younger, and over time, it's going to look good, but it's different.
My 2 cents are, just to go back to what you said originally, every lot's different, and you're trying to come up with sort of one-size-fits-all solutions for many different variables. So without looking at language, it's hard to give you direct feedback, but my big picture feedback would be try to come up with language that gives us as much flexibility as possible, because we're going to be looking at things lot by lot or parcel by parcel, and, you know, we'd like to be able to sort of come up with solutions that fit that parcel. I mean, to your point, if it's raw land, it's farmland, there's not a lot to preserve versus, you know, so.
Would it also, sorry, go ahead.
How do we mitigate existing structures? For example, rural residential, like, a lot of trees, how do I regulate, how is that going to be regulated?
So that's one thing that, in my opinion, is not currently clear in Article 11, where it was really kind of clear in the old Chapter 93. And we kind of talked about this at the November meeting, like, do we want to get into, like, the individual, like, existing lots that have already a structure on them? Do we want to get into regulating tree mitigation on those lots? And we did it under Chapter 93. Do we have the actual state statute authority? It's a gray area. I've mentioned that in the past, but, like, when it's tied to development, for example, if you wanted to do a pool and you were disturbing, I think it's 10,000 square feet in the ordinance, then you have to do, you do have to mitigate based off of your disturbance there. And so that's where, like I said, the mitigation, I don't think is clear, because you could have a 2.5 acre or 5 acre lot and say, well, look, I'm preserving 80% of my lot. I'm only cutting down this amount to put the building in here. Why do I need to mitigate? And so, like, you know, I get where you're kind of coming from on the flexibility. And so that's kind of that's what we're trying to work through. And so, and like I said, it goes from anything from somebody wanting to do a pool to a subdivision. And that's where, like, I will say certain language in the old Chapter 93 was a really clearly differentiate the two. In my opinion, like I said, Article 11, I think Article 11 gives you the flexibility as it currently reads. It's just, from my standpoint, I think it should still be further defined or clearer, just because one person may read it one way compared to how I interpret something. And so it's kind of, I don't want to necessarily get in that, leave it fully open to interpretation time standpoint.
So, I think, did it used to be at some point where developments, so neighborhood developments, had their own tree preservation section in that, and now, like, we're trying to consolidate it into all one section that applies to multiple situations?
Hold on, say that again?
So, do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so like, I can't remember. Right, like,
So,
trying to keep it all in one article instead of, because I feel like sometimes, like, lighting used to be in various places depending on what was being done. Right?
Yeah.
What people are applying for.
so, okay, so yeah, let me try to answer the question on if we amend it and how does it apply to existing property. So, like, one thing, an example here would be, right now, I can interpret one way that every single lot after it's developed has a 5-foot exterior tree, like each individual lot. So then any trees within that 5-foot exterior of the property can't be removed. Which would kind of in a way look at how we preserve, but like that's kind of one.
It's unhealthy or dead or.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's kind of one thing that, in our initial discussions, like how do we, how am I trying to say this? So let me back up and bear with me, sorry. What kind of spurred this is that we have a pretty robust tree ordinance when it comes to like development, subdivisions, all this other stuff. But how do we then regulate, okay, a property owner, comes in and wants to do a pool and certain things and want to remove some of those trees that were preserved in the original subdivision development? Like, it's not as clear in our current ordinance or in Article 11. And
And you've got, grandfather lots that were here before Marvin existed, and there is no count on what the canopy looked like. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think when we built on our land, we only cleared just enough to put our house, but, so we would clearly meet whatever requirement, but like, you don't know, and I don't even remember how many trees, we were completely forested.
yeah.
So, there is no record for pre-development for many houses in Marvin, so how do we even deal with that?
Well, and that's where like I can make requirements that state like, if you're removing 10 or more this is just off the cuff, like 10 or more canopy trees, you have to get a tree survey. Like, and that's just where I'm trying to find this fine line of, it's different for developers in larger subdivision type applications compared to an individual property owner that maybe wants to do a pool, like, or do we want to get into requiring a tree survey where then the property owner has to spend more money to document how many trees are there to really achieve us preserving what's on the lot? Or do we want, like I said, it's a very fine line, and I don't, I guess I'm sorry I'm not as prepared as I wanted to have this conversation, but ultimately, like, I want to make sure whatever we do draft for the February meeting is kind of in the direction that the board kind of has in mind for these revisions. But also kind of stay within our confounds of what we, in a way, how much I say, like, I don't want to be too restrictive, if that makes sense.
I think it goes to Ken's point. It needs to be wide enough for us to all have an opinion about it, because, and I'm a little passionate about this because I'm guilty. I had a tree almost falling on my house. I didn't come and get a permit.
Wait, you had a tree fall on your house?
Almost.
Oh,
It was a
almost.
dead tree leaning, so I
You
said,
don't need a permit for
Nope.
that?
I understand, but we took down other trees while they were there, because,
Oh, yeah.
they negotiate and say, hey, this tree, you should move. So I didn't come get a permit. If the goal is to preserve in Marvin, how do we regulate a homeowner from just saying,
Yeah.
just bringing a backhoe?
Well, and that's exactly the issue that we've been running to over the last the last few years, is that, like the two properties there at the gates at Marvin, there off Stacy Highway is a prime example. When Jones Homes developed those lots, they only cut or removed the trees within kind of the driveway and the building footprint, as well as some lawn area just around the home. Well, then the property owner comes in and wanted to remove more trees if it was for sunlight, if it was for just, other enjoyment and benefit of their property. It's their property. They got tree removal permits, but it's a process. On top of, it's a whole lot easier to tie it to development. Once again, the amount of times I get inquiries of, hey, I want to remove some trees from our lot, we want to do a pool, but we're not going to do the pool till next year. I'm like, well, can you wait to remove the trees to when you're gonna do the pool? Because it's so much easier to tie it to a zoning permit, so then, but, you know, some people have different processes on top of the money that they're spending on these projects.
You'll build the pool.
Correct.
I would just be taking down canopy trees.
Right.
Is there a way, like, so, I work with Tree Charlotte a lot of times, and there's all this talk about, like, you know, we're losing X amount of tree canopy. Who's counting? How do they know? You know what I mean? Like,
So Keith has, Keith, the Union County Urban Forester, he got a land coverage survey done 2 or 3 years ago.
is that like an aerial GIS kind of thing?
Yeah, and I have that report and be happy to, and I can potentially provide it to you guys for the next meeting, but it does kind of give you an idea of how much canopy we have currently. But then to your point on individual lots, like, the only way that I know how many trees are being removed is if it's part of a development. Like, if a property owner is removing a tree, typically the only way I find out is when their neighbor calls. Like, I mean, like I said, 3/4 of the people will reach out to me saying, hey, I gotta remove a tree, and get the applicable permits or approvals there, but, you know, sometimes it does happen, and so then you lose count of really how many you're removing. And it gets into that whole private property and what we really want to, in a way, how much control we want to have on trying to achieve the preservation for the village as a whole. If that kind of,
Question,
yeah.
there it is. How much control do you want to have?
And that's kind of,
You answer that question, everything else will follow.
correct.
Well, no, I'll say this, so, because after our last discussion on this, I've thought about it a lot, and I look at aerial footage a lot, just looking at lot lines and stuff like that, but I think Marvin is known for trees. Like, we are known for having, like, a rural feel, and that includes having a thick tree canopy, you know, outside of the, obviously, the farmland, but, and we need tree canopy in order to be able to breathe and clean our air, so there is a scientific reason why we should be protecting it. So, you know, I don't see why it would be unreasonable for us to have slightly higher standards for tree canopy protection than, say, Charlotte. Obviously, we should, anyone could be better than Charlotte at this point.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want, right?
What do you mean?
Firethorn.
Like the golf course?
Yeah.
I mean, for example, they got a permit to remove some of those trees, I think on like hole 3. I met with them
Keep it in the green.
between, huh? Well, it was more of,
Thousands of trees.
well, which conversations were had with them, they're planting a majority of them back. Then they have a new superintendent, to my understanding, and I met with him. And that's how the old ordinance read. Like I said, because they were, in a way, under the old ordinance exempt to these regulations. Now that Article 11's in place, since they were disturbing or removing the amount of acreage that they had to get that tree disturbance removal permit. So I was able to tie it that way. And at least they reached out and didn't just
Are
do
you
it.
saying they can't cut down any more trees without a permit?
Depends on the amount of area that they're disturbing, yes.
What amount?
It's 10,000 square feet per Article 11 currently.
Yeah, fifth of an acre.
So if we could take it's not really a theoretical, but, you know, there are people who have rural plots and they want a soccer field for their kids, or a full soccer field, or pickleball courts in their home, whatever it is. I do think that, you know, and Ken, I know we talk a lot about preserving the rights of the homeowner and the landowner. But I think there should just be a balance. I mean, maybe if a percentage works across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have any trees, because you've bought a lot that used to be farmland, you know, it's still a percentage is a percentage, so it kind of applies to all. But for people who want to, like, take all of it down so they have lots of just land.
So, okay, so if you guys are good with this, what I'm thinking is potentially I'll look at trying to clarify in the term development a little bit better. So then potentially breaking out like land development for like a subdivision or some type of like, mixed use, whatever, and those standards, but then still look at potentially a percentage or something across the board where if you are an individual property owner and you're removing or disturbing a certain percentage of your property or the existing tree canopy on your property, then you will have to mitigate. And I'll just have to get some research and kind of figure out and play with that. Does that sound okay with the board for me to?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there, could we, I know we don't necessarily have the staff for it, but instead of going out and getting, like having to pay a tree survey, come in and have a tree survey done, could they add a certain amount of money on to their permit so that our tree people can go out and do a
So, and once again, this was something under the,
moneymaker as well? Like, we're not outsourcing the tree
We'll just cover
mitigation?
one thing in that, like I said, once again, that's still one of the directions was like, okay, how do we want to do this on private property? The old ordinance basically said like, it gave me the discretion to require one or not. And pretty much what my rule of thumb is that if you're removing more than, 10 to 20 canopy trees, I may require one, but what I would always do is get a meeting with Keith and we'd walk the property with the property owner. Because the goal of a lot of those meetings is like, okay, why are you doing this? Okay, we get that answer. Then two, is there a way to potentially preserve some of these instead of just knocking them all down just because? And most of the time, we're able to get a few preserved, especially some of the quality hardwoods species that are in good health and native to the area, like, if it's an oak or persimmon, any of those, are going to be pushed to be preserved. And then if not, okay, what are we going to do for mitigation? And like I said, that works, but and that's something I'm fine with trying to incorporate in. Like I said, we can kind of leave that open for discretion for that flexibility where we're not requiring that tree survey for individual lot property owners unless but it could be requested upon by the planning and zoning administrator. We can kind of draft some language in that sense. So, because yeah, if somebody wants to remove one tree, because it's either dead or dying. Right now, I just say, hey, if you've got a report, please send it to me. If not, I send a picture to Keith. Keith's like, yeah, it's dead. And I'm like, all right, you can remove it. And I typically don't charge for that permit. Just it's like, like I said, the larger projects, and who knows on how many, it does seem like over the last couple of years, you're getting more and more of these requests. And so I'm just trying to find the best way to balance the enforcement and what our ordinance says, as well as being considerate of individual private property owners on what they want to do with their property. So, but.
You're my litmus test. What do you think?
It's a very complicated situation, and since we're writing the rules, I think we should, again, give ourselves as much flexibility as we can. I could think of other examples, like I've got a wooded lot and I want to thin it out to preserve the hardwood trees because there's a lot of, scrub pines that are growing and, they're ugly and they're actually interfering with the health, with the trees I want to preserve. At the end of the day, the rules should be to give us as much flexibility to be reasonable as we can, because I know from my experience, it's impossible to come up with statutory language that addresses every possible scenario.
And that's, like I said, the approach that Keith and I take, because it's even when you get to the way the state statute reads, like, it's our understanding that you have to have special legislation, like a local bill, to give us actual authority to regulate on private property unless it's tied to development. And so we've already kind of taken the approach of trying to be understanding and working with these property owners. It's just, now that we don't have that old Chapter 93, and I've got this language that was in there kind of just sitting there, like, how do we want to bring that in? And it, like I said, there's a balance between larger scale developments and then individual property owners. And I know that individual property was a key kind of discussion that we had. And so it sounds like I think we're on the same page of where we want to be with that. Now I just got to get the language kind of,
I mean, you had the other variable that tree removal's not cheap.
yeah.
And people are not going to go out and just spend thousands of dollars to remove trees because they hate trees. They're usually going to have a
true reason.
a true legitimate, logical reason why they're going to do it. Otherwise, they're just going to let the trees alone.
Or
Yeah.
a want. Sometimes it's
Say again?
just, sometimes it's just a want. Like, it's not necessarily like they want lot, like.
They want lawn versus
for soccer.
tree shade. Yep.
Well-
I mean, that's a prime example that I,
And how do I legally tell somebody on their own property that they can't cut their trees down, that they own? If they want to have I mean, they paid for it, they, you know.
Would it be easier with people coming in versus existing? Because it's just the rules.
Well, maybe if you just have, if you have a
so that's kind of,
prior permit, then you can actually look at it on a case-by-case
correct.
for
And to your,
existing homes.
and to your point, Marcus, with like if it's new development too, like one thing that we can potentially add into our ordinances, like I said, is we can basically put all new development, also each individual lot would have a 5-foot or 10-foot to kind of align with the setback requirements, for example, tree preservation buffer. And that would only apply, like, for example, if the Fincher property was developed as a subdivision, there is no application or discussion there, just for clarity. I'm just using it as an example in this discussion, is that they would have their subdivision buffer in tree preservation on the plat. But then it's also could get on the plat where it has a note that states each individual lot, has this individual buffer where then any trees planted, if a property owner wants to do a pool, and they, let's say, maybe have like 7 trees in their backyard, but 4 of those are in that, along their perimeter, they have to preserve those 4 because it's already, it's in a platted tree preservation strip. Does that make, so that's one way I've been toying with, potentially trying to, in the future, like for new developments, regulate that over time. I don't know how much it will help, considering a lot of the subdivisions are already platted, developed, and there, but, there could be way, and I would have to talk with the attorney on this and get some, it could be when we do that, it may still could apply to all as a whole. I don't know. I mean, it kind of, once again, it's kind of in a way open for interpretation and open how we write it. Yeah, correct. So,
It's also just education as well, I think some people who aren't as familiar with, especially who didn't grow up here with pines everywhere, don't realize a lot of times what are canopy trees and what are not canopy trees, and, like someone can clear a whole section, if they're clearing out brush, it's like, you feel like all the buffer's gone, but it was just brush.
It was underbrush, yeah.
So, like our
And-
Let's lot, he's got like wisteria just like lining the street. Like the vines are just it's beautiful and it smells lovely, but the vines are out of control. So like if someone were to rip all that up, you'd be able to see a lot further into the property, so.
I didn't do it. Correct.
Some options can just.
Yeah, I think I kind of get where, I think we're all kind of similar line, like, once again, like, and we can definitely draft that and bring that back. Like I said, the biggest thing why I wanted to have this on the agenda is because all that language that was taken out of Chapter 93 is sitting in a Word document right now, and I don't want to forget over time that there's certain provisions of that we want to incorporate in. And that's, once again, why I was on the agenda tonight. I was hoping to have a little bit more for you, but at the same time, like, continue the discussion, and we'll come back in February with, probably that gives us enough time to actually draft the revisions. I mean, there may be some certain elements that we'll draft and we'll kind of discuss further, kind of see what the board's, thought is and those regulations, and we'll go from there, so. Other than that, like I said, that's really it for Article 11. And I know that I know, once again, kind of another thing that was on the back burner was like lot coverage and stuff. Like, My goal is in that, by that February meeting, is try to come back with a majority of that stuff, so we can, you know, discuss it and potentially get it recommended and get it amended, at the March council meeting, so
I think that'll play into tree preservation as well.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot more sense.
Said there's a lot of moving parts, and they all go hand in hand, trust me.
That's kind of what I was asking, like, how do you lay it out in the ordinances? Is tree preservation its own section, and it's like every single scenario, you know, that you have written language for is in that section, and just, you know, everything refers back to it, or does it then also get repeated in the, you know, development sections?
I think the lot coverage, if we were to do like a percentage of the amount of impervious area based off the zoning district or in that, to your point, it would achieve some of this. And it honestly could maybe fix, because once again, if the property, let's say, already has, you know, 20% based off the structure, driveway and stuff like, and we can get a calculation, or some of these might already be on their survey. For example, a lot of the final as-built surveys, like in the Heritage Preserve, like on their final as-built survey has how much impervious area is already that developed on each property. So I kind of got a good idea and tally of that. And so like, yeah, then moving forward, like, and on those plot plans, they would have, you mean, if it's a, you know, 10 by 10 like patio, that's 100 square feet. Like, you know exactly kind of then how much impervious. So that could achieve some of that, and then that would then potentially, in a way, like I said, regulate how they can further develop their properties. But once, I would want to get those percentages right and what makes sense with people still being able to use and enjoy their property as they seem fit, or within,
Yeah. I think
as the zoning
like-
allows.
Like Ken said, I think the more options we have, so, because we want homeowners to do what they want with their property, but at the same time, when it starts to impede other people's property and quality of life because they have taken all the trees down and now
Yeah.
light pollution's spilling, you know, it's having that, you know, oh, okay, let's also add an A, B, or C buffer, you know, so, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll work on these and we'll come back. Again, apologies that I didn't have everything ready to go, but appreciate some of the feedback here, and we'll get those drafted and bring that back in February and go from there.
All right, planners report, do you have one, or was that it?
No, I mean, the two things, one, Lucas, so that was one thing I wanted to make sure,
Does Lucas have a last name?
it is Holden.
Holden, okay.
He has joined us from Pennsylvania, but yeah, he's graduated from UNC Charlotte. We're happy to have him here, and he's already been a huge asset and hit the ground running with learning stuff. So like I said, he dove into some research that on trees and just different stuff on zoning regulations. So once again, happy he's here, and if you haven't had a chance, just introduce yourself and you'll see him at every meeting. So, but the second thing is, like I said, Tree City USA, we got that, yay. So, and that's gonna be something that we're gonna try to achieve every year. So we'll have another Arbor Day celebration probably in the fall. And then the next thing is the comp plan. I know Kelly and Rich, you guys are on that working group, and I just want to mention to the rest of the board. So we have our first community workshop next week on Tuesday, I think. Double check that date. I believe it's Tuesday, January 27th, from 4:30 to 6:30. If you're available, please come out and attend. It's just a drop-by meeting, so it's basically a chance for you to come and learn what the plan is, the process, as well as they'll be, getting feedback, if it's on land use, parks and recreation, transportation, all the elements that's going into this plan. So yeah, if you're available, drop in, and it starts at 4:30, ends at 6:30, but like I said, it's not a 4:30 to 6:30 meeting. It's just come in and spend as much time here as you want type thing. And that goes for anybody listening online. Feel free to come by. The more public engagement and feedback we get in this process, the better that this plan can be for the long term and for the vision of the village. So please come out and participate. But other than that, Kim Weehorn, I believe, will be here at our February meeting because that's our joint meeting with council. So they'll probably go I'll double check this, so don't hold me accountable, but I believe in our project scope with them that they're going to present at that meeting and kind of have a draft of certain elements of the plan to present to the board, planning board and council during that time. So, but yeah, other than that, I think that is all I got.
Calendar, all right. So there are no action items. So board member comments. John or Bob?
Well, I was going to say, Happy New Year to everybody. We were talking here, we haven't seen one another since before Thanksgiving. So it's great, everybody's back. And especially with the new year, we have a new council. And along with that, we have obviously some applications that have been submitted for what would be planning board positions that might be opening up. You might be familiar, if you haven't paid attention or watched, there was a consideration that even though you're existing on the board, the take for granted that you would be renominated and go back on the board has kind of been sidestepped a little, in that you're still required, even if you're existing. I'll use John as an example. So John automatically is going to be coming up in March. I don't know if that's the case. I'm using an example. He's coming up in March. Well, the consideration was that he should put in an application for the position to, if you will, also be in or compete with applicants from the outside. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but that's new, and I don't know if, Austin, you want to add anything to that in terms of the procedures?
It's just that everyone has to submit an application now. We'll do an application period always in the months leading up to anyone's term expiring, or if there is a vacancy, obviously we would advertise a vacancy immediately. But it's just asking everyone just to put in an application now if they want to be reconsidered.
So, okay, so a full application or a,
Full application.
wow.
It doesn't take that long. It really doesn't. It's on the website now. You can click and go through it one
Well,
second.
it's a little concerning because it's, we spend a lot of time when we serving and then having to reapply. We could be losing some really important history.
Well, there was, I will say that in the council, I remember specifically, Councilman Bob Nunnenkamp was saying, I'm not too sure about this, because if somebody has been serving for a long time, right, and has been on the board for a long time and has contributed for a long time, he felt like it might be insulting, for them to submit really an application. I've been here, but I guess with the new council, that's kind of what they decided. So for example, I guess, Austin, I have applications that I'll be calling people between now and I guess the next council meeting, and then we're going to be considering at the next council meeting, or
The application period is open through the end of the month until Friday, January 30th at noon.
Okay.
As applications come in, I've been sending them to the council. They'll get a report from me at their February 2nd meeting, noting the number of applications received. For members that want to be reappointed, that includes a note from me if they're in compliance with policies, things of that sort. And then they would have like 2 more weeks to make sure they're calling and speaking to all the applicants. And then they would appoint at their work session on February 16th. To make sure this is all consistent, I did write a policy on this. It's with the attorney right now, just to make sure that everything is, to make sure that it is consistent, that it's fair. The goal of it being that no matter who you are in Marvin, whether you're on a board or not, or want to be on a board, everyone has level set expectations and can understand the process, and then it can be fair. So that's the goal, at least.
I would just, I totally understand that. I would just caution that, we all know that we serve at the pleasure of the council anyway, and they could remove any of us at any time for any reason. But having too much turnover at one time or could cause some real problems.
I mean, and that's correct. Anytime any new board member, anyone new comes onto a board requires a lot of time from staff regarding training and a formal orientation.
And
It feels like I put together a Bible for every new
It takes a good 6 months to a year
member.
for people to get their feet underneath them when you're dealing with this much information.
Well, the only one that's coming up is Ken.
Ken is up this time. There is a vacancy with Angel's seat. So that is what's being considered at this time.
So Ken's in 26.
We have a decent amount of churn anyway, so it's like, yeah, okay, well, just I would be cautious. You might find
up in
people
20.
start leaving.
You,
And
me, Bob, we're all in 27.
you and I have been on for, well, John took a hiatus, but you and I have been on for how many years?
I've been, and this is my second go around.
Yeah, I've just been
Speaking
consistent.
of being,
How many years do you have, Mike?
well, before I was removed by the council.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I've
You
never
were,
been
I did not know
removed,
that.
Oh, yeah.
but Maybe
The
it's
old,
not too late.
who was it? Gray-haired guy.
Oh, Ron Salameo?
Ron Salameo, yeah, just, so, yeah, you can be removed at any time.
There you go. My interview's tomorrow, so wish me luck.
You really do have an interview?
Interview. Good for you. Cliff notes, please.
Hey, at the end of the day, I told Austin, I said, I'm here just to try to help it.
Yeah,
If
that
you don't,
only
Yeah.
helps.
if you want to pick somebody else, I'm an advisor, so pick somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know that you've been removed, but it's, and we don't all obviously agree all the time, and you and I often vote differently, but I value your opinion, and if we all have the same opinion, that's like a government. So, we need those checks and balances, we need diversity of thought and diversity of backgrounds, and, on this board to have the best policies coming out of, so, it
Well,
just, that makes me,
Fortunately, we meet with them in February, correct?
Your joint meeting is, yes, the same day as their February work session, so it'd be the same day they'd be making the appointments.
From the council.
yeah.
February
This has
16th.
been a very respectful, board for as long as I've, for quite a long time. Not everyone agrees, but we all respect each other, and I feel like we've got a nice,
And this is not about,
I think, all different opinions, everybody speaks and everything, but then at the end, there's a lot of merging of all of those opinions. It's not just,
100%.
my opinion wins and yours loses. There's a lot of merging.
There's a lot of listening on this, and that's important.
Yeah.
Less talking, a lot of listening.
I think what precipitated this was the fact that Angel wound up, becoming a council member, because we haven't met, since the election, I think, correct? So, since then we have, I guess. But we had to replace her, so I think there's 2 positions open, am I correct by that? Yeah.
replacing Angel.
Well, I'm
and then
saying
Ken's- and then
technically.
Ken's term's up, yes.
Yeah.
And this is not just me being biased. I've been here for 6 years now. I've seen a lot of members come and go. This is the best iteration of this board that I've seen, frankly. So,
thank you,
do appreciate you all for what you do.
because we're all adults.
Well, speaking of appreciation, I'm going to continue with board member meeting minutes. So Lucas Holden, welcome to the organization. It's good to have you. And staff, thank you very much for your work, as always.
Absolutely.
Ken, did you get to say your 2 cents? Okay.
All good.
Bob, did you have any other updates? Okay, keep us posted.
And thank you for that update. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you for that update. Didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't
Lucas,
get the chance to see
welcome.
the previous meeting, so.
We're pretty low-key. unless, yeah. This is, at least you've missed all the party people in the audience. We'll be back there again, I'm sure, sometime. Go ahead.
Everyone, Lucas, welcome, and Marcus, my friend, good to have you back.
Yes, thank you.
That's right, you were, did you, sir? Well, we can talk about it afterwards, yeah. Marcus, you have,
No, welcome aboard, Lucas. Looking forward to working. Glad to be back. Happy to be back.
It's good to have you.
Be healthy and strong in 2026.
like, oh,
Last to be.
all right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Ken, good luck.
What would I do with all the-
Thoughts and
with all
prayers,
my
Ken,
free
thoughts and
time?
prayers. All right, so with that, Michael,
I move to adjourn.
all right, all in favor?
7.
Aye, aye.
All right. So
Thank you all.